So, you're driving down a highway and inevitably hit traffic because yet another section of it is under maintenance. Annoying, right? But we get it. Things like highways and bridges, they need to be in a near perpetual state of maintenance to keep them functional because they're assets that we rely on every day, so we invest in them. Now think about nature. Forests, wetlands, mangroves, they're also assets we depend on and use every day to grow crops, absorb carbon, and regulate the climate. But here's the thing, unlike bridges, we haven't treated nature like something we need to perpetually maintain. We've been using it up without thinking about its limits, and now we're running out of road. This is where the concept of natural capital comes in. It's a fancy way of saying, let's treat nature as an asset, one we need to care for and invest in. And here's the exciting part. By 2050, the natural capital market could be worth a lot, $1.5 trillion. That's a lot of opportunity for the businesses that step up. Enter Andrew Walker and his business AirSeed, one such contender. Think of Andrew like a bridge builder, connecting the business world to the idea of natural capital. AirSeed's drone technology is focused on planting trees and restoring ecosystems, monitoring their health, and helping businesses see the tangible returns of investing in biodiversity. Andrew's philosophy is that biodiversity is essential, and so it's time to think of it as an asset that we maintain, just like a bridge, a tunnel, or a road. Because if infrastructure keeps us moving, nature keeps us alive. Stay tuned for my chat with Andrew. Andrew, welcome to Climbers List.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome to have you here. So to start, I'm super curious. You've gone from the corporate world to startup land, and you worked for some pretty prestigious brands before.
Yeah.
What drove the shift?
I think it's a combination of things, really. So, yes, been in corporate world, but I think I realised early on that that space, whilst good, wasn't really what I wanted to do. And I used the shift from moving to Europe when travelling for 9 months around the world. Ended up in Australia. Came here for 6 to 12 months was the plan, and that was in 2007. I'm still here, and the goal was, when I got to Australia, look for employment, good employment, ended up getting sponsored back in the corporate space. But I wanted to use that sort of leap to a new country, new place, nobody knows me. You've got a clean slate to do something new, to build something new. And that's what I did in 2010. I sort of left corporate world, started my own engineering firm, and ran that for 8 years until 2018. In 2018, I walked away from that business, still running in the background very strong, but I used that as an opportunity to sort of take some time out, reassess, am I on the right path? Is there something else I wanted to do? And at that point, I really wanted to lean into one of my passions, which is environment, and still have a touch on engineering. And that's how the idea behind AirSeed was incepted.
So how did that idea come about? Was it something that you thought about for a long time? Sometimes we talk about the slow hunch, something sitting in the back of the mind for a long time.
No, I don't think it was grinding away in the back. I think it was a convergence of two things. One, my exposure to drones and the software and hardware that they use, because we used it in my other business, as well as doing things like going out there and volunteering to kill weeds or to plant trees. And the convergence of those two things was sort of what led, obviously, to the idea behind AirSeed.
How do we scale weeding and tree planting?
Yes, it is. How do we do it at a much bigger scale? Yeah.
Well, look, that's a good point to jump to AirSeed. It's an incredible emerging industry you're in. So airdropping seeds to reforest the land. I'm obviously simplifying here. So can you give us a bit more context as to what AirSeed actually does?
The thesis behind AirSeed was, how do we use technology to deliver that step level change in native restoration? So we can use drones, they can fly autonomously, we can fly multiple drones at the same time, and they can obviously plant a lot more seeds at the same time.
Autonomously, I'm getting Terminator vibes here.
Yeah.
with a good angle.
Yeah. And being able to really increase that delivery scalability was really attractive. But the thing that really we got stuck on at the beginning was we can use drones, we can put seeds in them, they can go and spray them on the ground, drop them on the ground. But if they don't have a higher level of success than they have today using tractors with spreaders to throw them on the ground, then really what are we achieving? So it's not just about the technology, it was about the integration of science and plant ecology, soil, lots of things to be able to come up with a solution for the biotech side of AirSeed, which is our seed pods.
So tell us about that, the development of that. What did that look like? Was it hard, stops and starts? What kind of people were involved?
It's still going to be. I mean, you think about it. There are tens of thousands of different species just in Australia alone. I think we have 27,000 different species. To be able to come up with a scientific solution that's generic across all of them, whether it be grasses, shrubs, trees, vines, is not going to happen. It's a very complex problem. So where we started off at the beginning was developing a very complex solution. We would go out there and we would take samples from root systems of trees and soil samples, and we'll be doing DNA and RNA sequencing to try and find out what microbes are there and what function the microbes have and how they actually helped or hindered the plant life. And we learned some great things in the early days, but we quickly realized that if you're thinking about doing that for one species, but then you've got this huge diversity in plant life, how are you going to scale that to be really effective? So our model has changed over time, and that in the early days, the best way that we could do that with limited funding was to partner with academic institutions here in Australia. We were lucky enough to get an ARC grant, an Australian Research Council grant, a linkage grant with UNSW, and that was really instrumental in guiding the development of the pods.
What was it like getting engineers who are quite blunt sometimes working with scientists who can be very, up in the air?
Yeah, I think, to be honest, I think scientists and engineers, the thing that they are really good at is speaking their mind, which is it's a superpower in my mind. I think the best way I always like to describe AirSeed's team is a team filled with creative friction, because there are so many disciplines. You've got engineers that are inherently researchers. They will keep engineering something until it becomes the best thing it could possibly be, when 10 iterations before it was the best thing it could possibly be for commercialization. Researchers are the same. They're very detailed into trying to solve a problem, asking a question, looking for the answer, which then sort of develops 10 other questions and then 20 other questions, and then you've got obviously commercial teams that just really want to sell stuff. And there's been lots of learnings for me as a leader. It's been challenging, but rewarding at the same time. Because when the startup is a lonely space, it's a hard space, both from survivability, finances, building a new team, creative friction. There's lots of things that come with it, and it can be very lonely. But I've been lucky enough to find those people around me to be able to use them as a sounding board.
Brilliant. So let's talk about the problem that you're solving. How bad has deforestation got? Where are things at?
I mean, it's really bad. It's the last 30, 40 years have been devastating. I mean, some facts. If you look at where we've gone to, so I used to always use statistics in the way that I would pitch or talk about the issue on a global level, on a macro level, which was always, from sort of mid-90s up until mid 2000 teens, like 2015, 2016, we'd lost around the size of South Africa in forest around the world, just in that short period of time. I think the latest registered statistic, which is around 2022, I think, was 2/3 of the size of India. So it's a massive problem, and it's not the causality of that is a multitude of different things, and some of the things that you actually think it would be is probably a lower contributor. Things like urbanization and other contributing factors, but shifting agriculture is a big one. But then we also have to think about, there is this, is it human induced, or is it climate induced, or are they both the same thing now? Because the human induced deforestation is actually contributing to the climate induced disasters that we're seeing with wildfires and floods and lots of other things. So the problem is big, and it's getting bigger. But what I do believe we have been really successful in the last few years is really bringing that education piece forward, and we are seeing movements now to build models and solutions that will help start remedying what we've done.
So when we talk about forest loss, we talk about forests as carbon sinks, like the ocean. That makes sense. But why biodiversity? Why is losing the rainforest, the Amazon rainforest, a problem?
Well, and you can simply go. People often think deforestation is just cutting down trees, but cutting down trees are habitat for wildlife. It's a way of absorbing CO2 and purifying the air. It's a way of helping create a healthy soil ecosystem. There are so many interlinking factors, from the microbes that are in the soil to the soil itself that help support this plant life that helps support our life and other wildlife, and air quality that also creates, it's an economy for many, being able to harvest seeds or different types of fruits or anything. There's so many interlinking factors, and that's why biodiversity is really what AirSeed is about, but we don't really talk about reforestation when we're talking about restoration. We're talking about biodiverse restoration. So that's the planting of everything from grasses all the way up to big canopy species. So
it's not like a monoculture. You're not planting pines. You're recreating the forest.
Exactly. Yeah.
How does that work?
It's complex, and it really depends on what you're starting with. Whether it's a natural disaster recovery, whether it's wildfire floods, or whether it's a land that's been cleared hundreds of years ago for agricultural practices that's now being returned back to its former self. And there's a process in the way that you restore, depending on how degraded the landscape is, how degraded the soil is. Are you putting down grasses first and then introducing shrubs and then more canopy species as you go? It's the restoration process, and the way that you get to an established ecosystem is pretty much like snakes and ladders. It's not just we plant them all and it works. There's a process to it, and every process and every single situation is different. And nobody really has the answers and the best way to do it.
That's fascinating. So you're working, I suppose, on building an ecosystem. So you need to understand the ecosystem that you're restoring or improving or adjusting.
Totally.
Are you restoring it back, or are you evolving it?
There's two things. The goal is always to restore it back, and there's lots of reasons for that, whether it's provenance of seed that will work really, really well on the location, but there's also climate adaptation, which you need to think about. So we are getting warmer. We're going to blow through the 1.5 degrees in the next few years and be on track to be above 2. So you have to think about species that are already in stress because they are experiencing those higher temperatures, those longer drought periods. And introducing the same species but from different areas where they've already adapted to those locations. So that's a big thing that is going to be very relevant in the next 10 years. But you are always trying to rebuild an ecosystem, one, to make it long-standing. You want it to be there for a long time. There's no point planting something that's going to disappear in 20, 30 years' time. But you're also mindful of what remnant vegetation is there.
Look, that's an interesting point for us to talk about, this idea of nature as capital. So for a long time, business has sort of seen itself as priming the pump. So there's funds, there's investors, there's people, and that all sort of exists in abstract. Mm-hmm. But now we're starting to realize, well, no, we exist on the planet, and the planet has resources, and there's this concept of natural capital. Mm-hmm. Now, business is not typically very good at managing, playing together to manage things, to manage shared assets. Can you walk us through natural capital and why it's relevant and how it relates to the AirSeed's business model?
That's a big topic. Probably to start that answer, I would say, we just talked about the problem, and I think if you're looking for the areas the people that can make the biggest impact in the shortest period of time, it's business. Business is the biggest facilitator of change, and we've seen some amazing restoration happening with NGOs, Nature Conservancy in Australia, Green Australia, Landcare Australia, doing some great work over the last 3-4 decades. But going back to the reason why AirSeed was created, which is how do we deliver that step-level change in scalability, and that's not just being delivered through the technology and the science of practitioners or technology enablers. It's being delivered by the changes in the market space. The people that are paying for the restoration, whereas before it was philanthropic. Now there's a natural capital that's flowing into this market because it's a new asset class, and it's nascent, it's new. So there are things to the market needs to grow. It's established now. Carbon markets, we're very much focused on biodiversity. We see carbon as a byproduct of biodiverse restoration, but it is at the moment, it's the market that is driving capital into the space. And I think Australia is actually leading the charge in a lot of these methods, both from a technology perspective, but also from a compliance perspective. So I'm a big supporter of it. I think the data is getting better. We need to get better with the data, but we need to get better demonstrating and visualizing and showing the data, because there's a lot of it out there.
When you say data, what do you mean? Data about? Data
to show that certain methods that are deployed in this nature-based solution space, in the active space, for example, in the carbon market space, that the methods deployed do have a beneficial impact, a positive impact on the environment, and are delivering good projects that are improving forest health, protecting forest,
acting as a carbon sink.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and that's all part of the journey. I said it's a nascent industry, and the industry is finding the tools now to be able to showcase the successes and failures.
So I guess there's the two questions that come out of that. One, are we putting a dollar value to nature? Is it $5 for a platypus, for example? and a follow-up, who's paying for it?
Well, nobody's putting a dollar figure on nature, because that's nobody has the answer on how to do that. It's such a complex problem, which is why people are putting a dollar figure on a ton of CO2 sequestered, because that's an easier unit of measure and something easier to be able to actually validate. But the nature problem is where we need to take strides towards, but it's a difficult one. It's complex. The flow of capital, would be from compliance markets like we have here in Australia. We've gone through some huge changes in the last few years with the Chill Report and the safeguard mechanism. But then to the voluntary markets, which are...
So compliance market, which looks like give us some examples of compliance markets.
So compliance market in Australia is the ACCUs, the ACCUs, and it's a unit measure of CO2 sequestered in different methods.
Australian carbon credit units.
Yeah, and so the unit measures 1 ton of CO2, and the measure of that is dependent on different types of methodologies, whether it be environmental planting methods, soil carbon, and lots of others. And they all have the eligibility criteria and the way in which you can define an increase in carbon sink in the soil, or an increase in biomass that is allowed to sequester CO2 out of the air, for example, in those two methods. So, and it's regulated by the Clean Energy Regulator. So it's governmentally regulated, and that is very different to the voluntary space, which is companies that are voluntarily buying credits to be able to bridge the gap between what they can't or haven't been able to reduce in their emissions, and what's left is called an offset, and then they'll buy offsets through investing in different methods. And that buying of credit is allowing capital to flow into the projects such as reforestation in the Amazon and lots of other things.
So that is specifically around carbon. One of the things that I'm struck by, you've got a business, I was at a symposium recently, you've got a business like Blackmores, which relies on biodiversity in its production process, or you've got a business like Coca-Cola that relies on water, or you have a developer that's building something adjacent to a waterway, and they might need mangroves to, instead of building a seawall.
Yeah.
How do those people think about natural capital?
I'm not going to speak on for the way they are thinking about it, but I'd say there are some people that are thinking about it really well. I mean, Mars is a prime example. Mars has been doing funding research into the bio reef for a long time. And what's the causality of dieback in the reef, bleaching, and
who's that? Mars.
Yeah,
Mars, the candy company.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So they're a big investor in that space. So there are organisations out there that are really investing in finding or funding research that's going to unlock some of the answers. So
interesting.
Yeah, corporate social responsibility is a huge part of governance now, and it is impacting the way that people think about brands and products that they will buy. The shift that we've definitely seen in this in nature-based solution space is we can't just purely rely on nature-based solutions to deliver offsets to be able to be a reason why company or a pathway for companies, large corporates who are large emitters, to be able to keep emitting and buying offsets to keep doing what they're doing. But there are many companies out there that aren't doing that anymore. They really are focusing on reduction
in their own process,
and limiting the offsetting. And that's really the only way we're going to get to.
So power corporations taking responsibility for actually decarbonising their supply chain or their operations.
Yeah, but then good to think about, there's companies out there that are never going to get to that point without offsets. If you're an airline or you just cannot reduce emissions to a point where they don't exist. So nature-based solutions play a part, but reductions play a big part.
It's just a market. I think there's a lot of dogma around this stuff where people are like, no, you can't use offsets. I think I'm a market forward person.
Yep.
If the market provides it, and it provides it in a way that is verifiable and valuable,
that's the important thing, right? And it's and I think that's where we are now. This convergence of technology with methods creation is getting us to that point.
All right, let's talk breakthroughs. What was the big moment that convinced you that drones were going to be feasible for this approach?
I think we always knew that drones were going to be a really good delivery vehicle. I think the question was more, in what context would they be really good? Are they going to come in and replace every type of planting system from direct seeding to tube stock planting, which is people with spades, and just recreate fence-to-fence planting with drones? Or is it going to be more nuanced than that? And that was probably really the biggest understanding of where they add real value. And I think we're there now. We know. I mean, the hard to get to areas, the areas which are really suited to other types of planting systems, such as hard, gravelly ground, rocky outcrops, slope gradients that are over a specific percentage, places where you can't get machinery and people to. That's really where the drones come into play. But also, we work in mine site rehab as well. So mine closures that are closing down, and the lot of the landscape there is difficult and dangerous to get machinery onto. And it's also very degraded. So the combination of being able to use technology to deliver the pods, but then being able to use the pods to help rehabilitate the soil at the same time as planting seeds, it has been a really good combination. Because degraded land, you can put seeds on the ground, but you're pretty much just wasting seed. And if you can help rehabilitate soil to create a hotspot of area that is a good incubator, a good host for seeds to germinate and grow, it's a much better outcome.
When you say rehabilitate soil, I've been reading up on this recently. What does it mean to rehabilitate the soil? What are you doing?
Well, I'll give some examples. So, in a context of my site closure, for example, you have very dispersive soils, which are high salinity, high alkaline.
Dispersive?
Yeah. So you've got basically, if you can imagine, really cracked, dried, erosive a landscape. That's pretty much
the Australian desert. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's because you've got, well, I won't go into the chemistry reasons of why, but you essentially end up with a compacted hard landscape that has is very high salinity, but it's pretty much the pH balance is off, and you need to try and find a way to rebalance that soil in some ways to be able to allow a seed to be able to grow and continue to grow. Now, throwing a seed in the ground obviously is not going to allow you to do that. So by planting a pod and putting different types of inclusions inside of there to help with that process, it's a good initial step to allowing germination to happen for seeds to start growing. But it doesn't stop there. That's a good first step, but you have to continue to treat the land, whether you treat it through solid or liquid amendments. We do both with the biotech, which is different applications for different reasons, but it's a good way to ensure that
So you're spraying?
We'll spray as well, yeah. It depends on the landscape and on the project, but we'll do different types of post-plant amendments to a project to ensure that it can continue to grow.
Wow. God, complex.
Yeah, it's complex, yeah. And I'm not a scientist, so I draw the line. I have a good understanding, but I'll leave that to the team to talk in more.
To the experts. Yeah. Well, it's good to know your domain. So let's talk about the scale of the opportunity. How big is this market? Is it $100 billion market? How's it going to grow, do you think?
So globally, by 2030, they're predicting $1.5 trillion for nature-based solutions. Trillion.
That's a Dr. Evil moment for sure.
I think it's one of the fastest growing asset classes out there at the moment.
And in terms of your share of that market, what does that market look like today in Australia?
Yeah, and I could look at it as in two ways. It can give a financial perspective and the size of the market. You can look at what the actual landscape is for restoration alone, just in Australia, up to 6 million hectares. That is primed for reforestation in Australia alone. So that's a massive amount of land that's ready for rehabilitation. But I think this is probably a good segue though to come into talking about the other things that AirSeed does, because while we're known for the drones, we're known for the planting in the pods, that really is only a fraction of our business. And in fact, the drones are probably the smallest part of our business. We're not drone developers. We don't develop our own in-house drones. We have done in the past, and believe me, that was a bad decision, business decision. The best way for us to scale is to be able to use the tools that
stuff that's lying around.
Exactly. And market share, there's a company out of most drone companies come out of China, and they have totally captured the global market. So for us to be able to build agnostic payload systems that can actually fit onto those drones, and the software, really focus on our software that will help interpret or tell a drone what the payload needs for it to do, is a much more scalable solution. But outside of that, we really focus on, sort of alluding to before, the growing of an ecosystem more so than planting of an ecosystem is a big distinction. And success is often really impacted from what you do before you even plant. So everything from the type of land preparation you're doing, are you removing weed load? Are you doing low intensity burning? Are you doing slashing with weed spraying and other things? are you doing whip lines with tractors? There's a multitude of different methods that people use today to do land prep, which ultimately will impact the success of a project because it's giving the plant the best habitat for it to start growing in. But also taking it to a high level, it's about micro matching of species. So understanding the terrain, understanding the slopes, the gradients, the soil types, the soil conditioning. Is it rocky? Is it not rocky? Riparian zones, which is rivers, areas next to rivers, and you know what the sort of remnant vegetation surrounding is. You know what species you're going to be planting, but where should you put them? So we call it micro matching. So where you put natural species in the landscape to get the best results. And then you've got the planting. You know, what type of systems do you do? Should you use drones? Should you use tube stock with people? Should you use a vehicle with a direct seeder on the back? Where am I going to get the best outcome, and where am I going to get the best, I suppose, because it is becoming it is an asset class. You have to look at the cost benefits analysis between doing different things.
So you fall in love with the problem, not the solution, and you're kind of solution agnostic. But you're a platform, and that language has come through in some of the research that we've done. You're a platform.
Yeah. So we we have a platform that is really across the entire life cycle, end to end of a project. Whereas previously, just as the drones and the seed pods, we were really focused on the establishment. But the establishment is, you might plant once, then you do infill planting and maybe infill planting again, because there's no such thing as 100% success rate when you do native restoration. There's always threats and risks that will impact your survivorship. So you've got a number of times that you'll plant. But I often use the sort of the comparison of using our drones and the biotech. We can plant really fast. Minimum amount of people, we can do thousands of hectares really quickly. So if we can do that really quickly and it takes days, then if I put that in the context of what it actually takes how long it takes to restore an ecosystem or rehabilitate an ecosystem, you are talking decades. So days to decades, we were really focused on one thing when we should be focused on the decade thing.
So you're not scaling up. You already have that capability that's inherent in the technology that you're dealing with. Yeah, you're out over time.
That's it. Yeah, and that logic in how do we optimize success through the way that we do land prep, the way that we, even before you actually on a project, how do we identify the project? How do we assess the project? How do we know what the risks are? How do you inherently build in mitigation strategies to reduce those risks? So it's all about the planning. It's about the assessment, the viability, and the planning. Then it's about the planting with the different types of planting systems. We're agnostic to the planting systems, drones or and then it's about the monitoring at the end, which is people call MRV, measurement or monitoring, reporting, verification. Big part of what is really being pushed in this industry at the moment because it is an asset class.
And that's what creates the reliability of carbon and biodiversity as an asset class.
It's the data, yeah. So being able to know what you've planted, where you've planted it, but then to be able to say it's worked is a really big thing. We're really, the underlying part of that is for us is not just about developing technologies to identify if it's worked or not. We're more about developing technologies and solutions for ensuring that it does work along the way. So, and that's what our platform does.
So measuring and managing.
Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. So obviously investment and partnerships super important in the space. What does that journey of investment and partnerships look like for you and where you're at right now?
Yeah, I mean that's been a journey as well. Hand on heart, I would say that when we started the business back in 2019, we were probably too early. The industry wasn't ready to adopt new technologies at that point in time. But I think where we are now with the platform and our sort of growth horizontally, not just vertically, gives us a much bigger opportunity into a lot bigger sector of this space. And I think the investment opportunities and the partnership opportunities have never been better. We just need to find ways to unlock them.
What has your raise process looked like? It's it's different in climate, I think, to my background, which is in tech.
Yeah, and it is. It's I would when we keep talking about capital and asset classes and growing, I will say there's still one problem with the flow of capital. The capital's here at the top of the funnel, but the bottom of the funnel is really, really tight and small at the moment. And it's because we're still trying to figure out how to join our dots between that whole horizontal end-to-end life cycle of projects to delivery of something, which is a unit of measure, a carbon credit, something else. So one of the reasons for the platform is to help unfragment that fragmented capital flow into high integrity, high yielding, really good opportunity projects.
So I guess you're funding two things. One is the core operations of the business to help you scale up. The other is actually the projects that you're delivering. So how you're getting customers, effectively capital, investment, infrastructure into this natural infrastructure that you're building in.
Exactly. It's like we have a long-term plan of what the platform will become, but I'm an engineer. I know we can't just go straight to the North Star and build the North Star and expect it to be there. There's a pathway to it. I think where it stands today is really good, and it's a good way of doing exactly that, helping the flow of capital find where it needs to go to be able to start these projects on a bigger scale, and ultimately that flow of capital will create a bigger marketplace, and that's what we need. We need a bigger marketplace. We need to scale the marketplace, and that requires technology, and it requires lots of other things as well. And what we're building is a pathway to help that marketplace grow in a number of different ways.
So are you raising at the moment for your core operations?
We are. We're just about to launch now. Well, we are just launching now into what we're calling a pre-Series A. Our journey so far has been back in 2020. I think we raised through a crowdfund. We raised about $400,000 in crowdfunding, and we've had 2 rounds since then: a seed round and a bridge round because of COVID and lockdowns. And it's been a journey. I think every CEO in the space, any founder that's trying to raise capital, it's a time-consuming, long process, and it's been good. I mean, we've been very successful in raising capital, which has been really good. I expect we'll be really successful this time as well. But it's been a learning curve.
Have you got a target in terms of what you're raising in this round?
Yeah, we're only raising $5 million at the moment. Our goal is really to focus on execution. So we strategically doing a pre-Series A to push a Series A out until the end of next year.
Got it.
So that we can really bolster the revenue targets that we set ourselves.
Got it. So let's pivot now to the I guess the journey that you've had. How do you deal personally with the enormity of that challenge? We talked about the scale of the deforestation we're experiencing.
Differently now than I did at the beginning. I think, and I think you can probably see, people will see that in the change of the messaging that AirSeed's had, and I think that's partially the message change is probably coming from the way that I'm thinking about the space as well. The mission hasn't changed. The mission is still we want to deliver that step level change, and we want to have the biggest impact we can possibly have, positive impact, both from an environmental perspective, but also from a societal perspective as well, because they both go hand in hand. And our mission statement is to accelerate nature's recovery using science, technology, and people. And so that direction hasn't changed. I think the one thing that we've definitely become more focused on is being a commercial entity. Not the problem is there. We just need to develop the tools that are most commercially focused and bring them to market, because that is inherently going to have the biggest impact. So there's been quite a few changes in our business model, the way that we do that. Before, we did lots of CSR work, planting projects, taking community money, taking corporate money and putting it into community to help with things like Glismore landslips and winter wetlands and lots of other really good projects, and they need to continue. But we aren't going to reach scale. We aren't going to have the impact unless we become a technology that's really embedded in this space as a commercial product.
Climatelism. This is the thing. You've got to have the hard-headed watch over the money and
You do.
And the impact.
Yeah, 100%.
How does it feel? So, you're going out for this raise again. You must have a level of confidence that you've got something good to sell. How does it feel knowing that you're onto something promising and that you're part of creating the solution in this natural capital space?
Yeah, this is the honest truth. I've never ever felt like we're there. We are literally at the bottom of the hockey stick with what we have now. So I've never been more pumped. In fact, I've never been busier. Never been more pumped, but I feel so motivated because I know what we have is amazing, and it is going to help unlock that marketplace, help unlock that flow of capital into the space. And if that's what I think now, you ask me the same question in 6 months, 12 months time, because every day it's changing.
Is the confidence building?
Every day. And that's because, yes, the narrative of our North Star, I think, is really relevant to the space, but I think it's also, it's the roadmap to get to it is very achievable and really aligned with the speed at which the market is going. Because again, you can have some really great technology and you can develop some really good stuff, but that product market fit is so important. That's what we've been absolutely focused on for the last 12 months. We've got a really good product. What parts of that product can hit put the tires to the road at what time? And because we've been really strategic in the delivery, I think, that's really helped reinforce the confidence behind how we can scale. And I believe we can get to this number by this date, but knowing that we can get to that number conservatively by, in a shorter period of time.
Brilliant. But cast your mind back for me, a moment when you wanted to throw it all out, and I'm sure there's been a couple.
I was really going to start. There's been plenty of them. As I said, it's not easy. It really isn't easy. I think the biggest learning is that product market fit. Engineers, researchers, we've talked about them before. They like to develop technologies and solutions for a space, and whilst we are mission driven, the space at which we're driving the technology towards has to fit the market, and we've made mistakes. I know, hand on heart, we've made mistakes, and we learn from them. It has been snakes and ladders. It's been up a ladder and down a snake, and that every time we've fallen down a snake, it's made us step back and reassess the business model. And going back to every time we've fallen down, it's either the team that supported me or I've supported the team, or we've gone out to try and find the people that we needed to help put us back on the right track. And we did that recently this year, and we've created a whole new advisory board with some amazing people that have helped steer the products and the business model sort of goals over the next 3 years in a way that is matching the speed of how the market is developing. So I think failure is good. Fail fast, as they say, which I'm happy to fail as long as we learn what we've learned from failing and put it to good use next time. Easy to say, but it does impact you when it happens. So you just got to make sure that you've got those people around you to reach out and ask for the advice and help.
Yeah, it's interesting. A few years ago, my business was at a crossroads. We'd taken on a customer, expanded overseas, bitten off more than we could chew. And I remember sitting in a conference, and there was a speaker saying, someone once asked me a question, how do you go broke? Yeah. And the answer was very slowly and then very suddenly.
Yeah.
And I was sitting in this room in the darkness, and all of this stuff was coming down at me. Yeah. and I was just like, shit, we're on the verge. Have you had a moment like that?
Yep, many. I think that's also part of the journey as well. It's when you are developing something new and it takes time to develop and your market to commercialize it is limited. That's what we definitely found in the early days, was we wouldn't survive without investment. That's why we needed investment, because we needed the funds to build the product. And investment has, over the last couple of years, been difficult. It's been hard. So you have faced those times where you know that you're running as hard as you possibly can and you're developing some really amazing stuff, but at the end of the day there's a brick wall in front of you, and it's my job to break the brick wall down or to put a door in the middle of it, and that weighs heavy on you, especially when you've got, what you're building is hopefully going to impact that mission that you've got, but also the people around you feel heavily responsible for them. So,
and who do you call? Who's the first person you call when you bash your head up against the brick wall?
Probably the first person to call is my wife.
Yeah, of course, 100%.
Yeah, and she's used to it. And at the end of the day, she's on the journey with me, and she's been there before in the previous business, and now she's here again. But it's first person, and by far the biggest, I suppose, supporter. And yeah, she's very good at getting me back on a horse. But everyone has these moments, and it's so she'd always be the first person, and then second person would always be somebody in our team that is a very good sounding board to help rationalize and put things in perspective.
So emotional fallout and then taking action.
Yep.
Got it. So not everyone's going to found a climate startup and build a team around them. What can everyday people do to help contribute in this space?
I think it's. I think most people are contributing in some ways now. I think the voice is now louder than it's ever been. I think there's a great book out there, and I'm going to exercise the name now, but it's written by a guy called David Wells, and it talks about climate action and how individual contributions by everyday people is going to be hard to shift the dial, and it needs to be the dial to shift towards net zero and help recover nature. Has to be a top-down approach, so legislated from governments and so on. And I believe in a lot of that sort of sentiment. However, I don't believe that an individual contribution can't make a difference, because individual contributions typically create movements, followings. It's chatter, it's conversation, and those things grow in size. So it's about just being educated, knowing what the problems are, what the solutions are, and how they're best being deployed, and then talking about them.
Have an informed view.
Totally. Easy to say, but it's
it's hard.
So important though.
Hard and important, absolutely important. So, dream mode. We're in 2050. Things have gone absolutely right. Where is AirSeed, and where is nature?
Mm-hmm. So 2050, that's big. I'm very focused on the micro. So I very much look at things like 3, 6, 9, and then 3 to 5 years. But let's go 2050. 2050, we've had, let's go in stages. Like 2030. 2030, we have developed a very good asset class around nature-based projects, and we are really gearing towards biodiversity as the core asset class, not just carbon. And we've developed technologies and tools that are helping us figure out what is that unit measure. How are we going to measure it? How are we going to put a price against it? We are increasingly moving emissions down through reductions, introducing some new technologies. The illegal deforestation and deforestation is decreasing. All the way through to 2050, where we have very established, very controlled, really strong markets for biodiversity. Deforestation is a thing of the past. We're not focused on deforestation now. We're just focused on either maintenance or protection of what we have. And in that process, synonymous with that process is a company that used to be called AirSeed that is now called Grovia, because we're going through a rebranding called from AirSeed to Grovia that better encapsulates the products that we're actually bringing to market. And we are synonymous with parts of that process, with developing technology solutions to be integrated into that process, but also through having a voice in the way that process, those methods, that sort of system architecture of how do we do it is being part of AirSeed or Grovia will be part of that voice. So I'm an optimist. I'm definitely the pint glass is half full, not half empty. I think we've still got means and a roadmap to be able to fix some of the devastation that we've caused, because we do have, like, we've got amazing technologies out there, we've got amazing science out there, and we've got a will to make it change. So yeah, I expect to be sat there in the middle of a beautiful forest when I'm old with grandkids, sipping a gin and tonic and
celebrating success. Finally putting down the tools.
Yeah. Well, hopefully I'll put the tools down before 2000.
As you say this, I can see it. I can genuinely see it, and I can feel what the company is doing. That's incredible. It's a beautiful vision.
Yeah. That's just my vision. You can go and ask everyone in the business that there'll be. I think the underlying theme will be the same, but everybody have a version of the same thing.
Moving to close, I have two questions that I ask every guest. The first question is, who's been the biggest influence on you, on your life, and maybe in the context of this work that you're doing now?
That's a big one. The biggest influence on my life from so might sound cliche, but I think my father would definitely be top of the list. Parents as a whole, they've been rock solid supporters of everything that I've done, even though they sometimes don't agree with the risk. But they've been a huge influence, and if anything, if the one person I will be striving to be is my father. But outside of that, there's been some real contributors who aren't here anymore. So people that have been part of my life that aren't here anymore, that I strive to live my life in the way that they led theirs. So whilst we're building something really good here, having the motivation to get through the hardships, get through the pain points, and just keep going and keep going and keep going. Also be mindful of the things that you do have. So family, friends, and never lose sight of those things. So yeah, that's probably the two.
Pretty powerful. And finally, what opportunity do you think is being left on the table in climate?
I think the biggest issue that the Earth faces is this isn't a micro problem, it's a macro problem, it's a global problem. And whilst we might be running full steam ahead in places like Europe, which are really progressive in this space, there's other parts of the world that aren't. So it's how do we bridge the gap between the speed at which forward-thinking progressive companies are accepting that climate change is here, we are in a climate crisis and we need to do these things quickly, married with maybe other parts of the world that are either not at the same viewpoint or aren't able to be able to implement the same speed. That's the big question, how we solve that.
Brilliant. Andrew, thank you.
Thank you.
Once again, if you like listening today, then please subscribe to The Climatalist wherever you get your podcasts, and give us a follow on Instagram, where we're just Climatalist. I'm Anton. Thanks for listening.